8 years ago. So what happened was, as the culture resource manager, when a project comes across my desk, you can just put it in the sharing office. They were gonna, the natural resources group were cleaning all the mangrove around Pearl Harbor, and I had to review that, and I knew that there was a pond here. This was recorded back in the 1940s. I never saw it though, because it was all very dense mangrove. And you could see this is NTK Howe here. It was right over here. How thick it was. And so what I did was I crawled through here and I found the rock wall. Now that what you see today was just an alignment of rocks. And I found the Makaha, which is the gate. And so part of my job is to consult with the Native Hawaiians. We have a site here, and that you're going to be clearing a mangrove. So we had an archaeological monitor. Uncle Shakani was the cultural monitor. I didn't know NTK Howe at this time, or Uncle Bruce. And so I was telling Uncle Shad, well, you know, they're going to be clearing all this mangrove. We're going to have an exposed fish pond. You think anybody might be interested in restoring it or maintaining it? And he said, I don't know. Let's call a meeting at his cultural park in Kaliloa. And that's where I met everybody. I went there not expecting many people, maybe 10. There was like 40, 50 people there, and they were just all excited about what we're doing here. I didn't know about 1999, you know, that they tried before. Sorry about the helicopters. I don't know why there's a lot of helicopters today. They must know I'm here, yeah. Recording me, spying on me.
That's what we're doing here.
That's the Admiral looking for me. Yeah, so that started the consultation, and so they approached me and they said, Jeff, you know, we really want to restore this fish pond. And what makes it so important, and this isn't a map, it'll probably be a little hard to see from a distance, but all these blue areas were fish ponds around Pearl Harbor. This is the airport. It was all fish ponds, all the way downtown Waikiki, all fish ponds. Of all this, how many are remaining? There was over, you know, just around Pearl Harbor, it was 22. There was 8 at the where the runway is. All here, of all this, there's only 3 remaining. One of them is where we are today, and then the other 2 are Lalonui Island, and there's West Loch. And so my first thought was, wow, you know, this is, I studied the fish ponds when I was back at Bishop Museum many, many years ago. And so I was always fascinated by fish ponds. I mean, how would you even consider building a wall? Just amazing to me. This is, you don't see this anywhere else, only in Hawaii. And so my thought was, we got to preserve one of these fish ponds. And so when I saw this one exposed, what a great example. And you know, plus too, you don't have to go on base. You can come right through the housing area. There was, at the time, there was security. You had to write everybody's name down and get, you know, the security forces to allow it. Now it's just open, so we're really grateful for that. So during my study, I found out that this pond, there was archaeology work here done many years ago when they did quarrying, and they found that this pond dated between 400 and 500 years ago. And it kind of correlated with MTK was talking about. So that's what's really important about archaeology and cultural. We put the two together to it's like a puzzle. And that's how we found out what was going on. So that was in 2014. And I'll tell you a little story. So every couple of years, the Office of the Navy, they come here and they have like meetings with the Native Hawaiians and then DOD, talk about how we can improve relationships. And so I always was part of that. So the guy in charge of that, he called me one day, he goes, Jeff, President Obama, he went to the Sioux Nation. He was appalled by that the kids are not even learning their culture anymore. They're losing that. He goes, I wanted you to do something about that. So my friend at OSD, he said, hey, Jeff Penelay was doing something really good out here. And so this was recognized by President Obama, and he did executive action, do something about it. That's why, one other reason why we're here today, because they've been supporting it. So OHA provided interns, and they wrote the preservation plan, the MOU between the Native Hawaiians and the Navy to allow what we're doing today, access to here, doing protocol. And so it was all been building up. So for the last 8 years, we've been cleaning this mangrove, all the vegetation, and planting native. And so every year I get funds, and we are buying that, buying supplies, and we're continuing doing that. And so there's a big project happening right now with the Navy. It's the shipyard. They're building a new dry dock, and mitigation for that is to dredge all that out. There's a lot of silt. You still got the mangrove matting. It's all going to be gone in about a year. And then they're going to help rebuild the wall. So we have a lot of great stuff going on here. So one of the important things that I learned. So when you go to archaeology school, they tell you, the physical remains, the material remains. But one thing I didn't know is the significant, the spiritual, importance of these sites. And because of just one sitting down with Chad County one day and talking about the site being exposed, look what's happened till today. We're here together because of that one discussion I had with Chad. And it's just amazing. And so when I do archaeology now, not only do I record the physical remains, but I talk to the kapuna. I talk to Native Hawaiians, and I want to know more. What's so important about the site? It's just not a wall holding the water. There's something so much more important about this, the spiritual part of it. So when I do my research, I do the traditional Hawaiian consultation and the physical. So I put those together, and I now I know how important, and why they put it here. There's so much more to it than just the stones. So, any questions about this? So, yes, please.
I'm just curious that, when they found all those fish ponds, how did they know at that time that these are fish ponds? And
So when they did record it, there was still several fish ponds around here. There was no mangrove yet. So this was like the 1940s, 1930s. So the archaeologist at the time was able to look through the records, and they found old maps from the 1800s that showed fish ponds. And then he talked to Native Hawaiians, and they said, this is local pa'aya. So there was through oral histories they were able to understand the fish ponds. And there's over 1,000 fish ponds in Hawaii. And when I was at Bishop Museum, I was part of the group that inventoried all the fish ponds in Hawaii. This was back in the 1900s, 1990s, something like that. So, and we not only talked to the Native Hawaiians, we talked to other archaeologists who record these fish ponds, and it was a big production. So one important thing is, you can see this map closer later. You'll see that it's all divided by apua'a, and every apua'a had its own fish pond. That's why I said 22, because there's 22 apua'a. And so each one was a thriving community within itself. The apua'a system, so they had the marine resources. Inland there you had the taro, and then upland all the way to the top of the mountains. That's where they were hunting and gathering. And all these community people within the apua'a were sharing resources. And that's how they thrived. That's why it was so productive.
what's an apua'a?
Apua'a is a land division. And so each one was, I don't know how long ago it was, maybe 500 years ago, Hawaii, the kings divided Hawaii into these smaller land divisions. So you had, first of all, the Moku, which is the districts. So we're in the Eva district, and then there's the Kona district on the other side. Ironically, it goes right through Hickam Air Force Base. And Queen Emma used to live right on that border right here. That's another story. But so we're in the district of Eva, and so all these we are. You can try to find us here. Oh, here, right here. Sorry, yeah. So we're in this Kaloa, Apua'a, and the Ili within. So every Apua'a was divided into Ilis, land divisions, and we're in Pa'aya. So there's all these steps that people were able to live and flourish and share resources. Any other questions? Thank you for that question.
I just don't know if you've answered this already, but why did it kind of disappear? Was it because of the bombing?
Oh, you mean the other fish ponds?
In the 1940s, right? It
Yeah.
was kind of the mangroves took over.
Yeah.
Why did they take over? Was it because of the
Well,
bombing?
one is mangrove is very invasive, and at that time they thought mangrove. Well, see, all throughout the Pacific, mangrove is very treasured because that's where the crabs live and other. But in Hawaii, no, it clogs up the streams, and it ruins the water. The ability of the water. So nobody was here to clean it though. So the housing area is kind of separate from this, so nobody maintained it. And you would see all the mangrove going, and all the other fish ponds were basically filled in during the sugarcane era, and also development, even all the way to Waikiki downtown. They're all just filled in, and so with the mangrove, it was just invasive. It grows very fast. You can see it's coming back until we're gonna have to dredge it. But if we didn't maintain it after we did the initial, it would be all back again. So seeds that just fly in here, and it's out of control. That's why it's so important that we're out here every month cleaning all that. Did I answer your question? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
okay.
mean, they started happening, as in they were in use before the 1940s.
The fish pond, well, back in the early 1900s, there was a Chinese community living here, and they were using it for, they had the fish pond, but they also had, I think, rice and stuff. So, yeah. And then after they left during the bombing, then it was just abandoned.
Okay.
And then the mangrove came in, I think it was in the 60s and 70s it came in, the mangrove. And just stayed here until we came.
Okay.
Yeah. You can see even mangrove. This is mangrove right here.
All right.
Yeah.
Wow.
And that's all going to be removed during the mitigation. Yeah. So, and once it's made, once it's back to basically a functioning fish pond again, then it's important that we continue maintaining it. And that's why we're big school groups here, because they're going to be the future caretakers. I'm not going to be here forever. I want to be, but I'm not. Yeah. But we got to teach, and that's the whole idea of my starting this program, was to teach the kids. Because they got to continue what we're doing. We can't. This was almost a lost art at one time, doing fish ponds, but it's been coming back strong, and a lot of people are now restoring fish ponds. There's now laws to, streamline, except for this is federal, but on the state, they can streamline it. So there's it's active now, really strong. People are trying to save the fish ponds. Especially Molokai got the best fish ponds. It's amazing. Yeah. Okay. Any other? Yeah, Uncle.
So how does
Easy question.
very easy, this one. So how does climate change affect fish ponds nowadays?
Yeah, so because we are anticipating higher sea level and also stronger waves, so when we are restoring these walls, we're storing it higher than it was probably originally, because we got to consider that climate change is going to affect it. But one thing important is that we've been through so many hurricanes and earthquakes. The buildings are collapsing, houses, but what's that? These fish ponds are still intact. That's how well made they were. Now when we do construction, they're not going to last long. Look at the pyramids in Egypt. They went through so much, and they're still there. But this fish pond, there was when we had the earthquake in Japan, this was affected by it. The waves came in here. This fish pond wall is still there, no problem.
So would you say, and there is the question of how sea level rise may impact, and that's a big issue on these islands, a big part of climate change, so impact and causing harm and vulnerability, but also how this traditional form of stewardship may be building climate resilience. Is that, how much has that been looked at?
So when we plan on restoring this wall, so we're going to sit down with NTK, Uncle Bruce, and all the NHOs who are involved here, and we're going to address that. So when we do the planning, it's not going to be done by bringing machines in here and building the wall. It's going to be all done traditionally. And so we are going to sit down and discuss what's the best to ensure that sea level rise or any other, so we're getting more storms too, if you notice too, yeah. So we got to make sure that, even if they are affected, we're going to have a plan to maintain it. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Got two questions. The first is, based on your knowledge, what impact has the military presence here had on the fish ponds, specifically, with regard to to natural resources as well as heritage. And my second question is, around the world, mangroves are being seen as a nature-based solution to mitigate rising sea levels and even mitigate storm surges.
Mhm.
But how is Hawaii different in terms of the use of mangroves to mitigate climate change?
Tense questions. Yeah, thank you. Well, first of all, when the mangrove was here, the residents didn't even know there's a fish pond here. And so when they were watching us doing the work here, they became very interested. And now, my goal was to bring the Navy and the Native Hawaiians together, to work together, to get to know each other. Because, you know, the Navy, they don't leave the base. They work on base, they go to school on base, they eat on base. They can go to the beach on base. They don't interact with the community much. So I was trying to get those two together. And so now that this is clear, and a lot of kids here are homeschooled, and they come down here as part of their curriculum. And we're also bringing other schools from outside, like Aiea High School, to come here and learn. And so that interaction is helping just to get to know each other, because we didn't know each other before. And that's really important, you know, because when we are in strength, there's strength in numbers. So when we're trying to restore this pond, I got admirals coming down here, captains coming down here, supporting it, telling their shipmates to come down here. I get calls from the ship, the chaplains on the ship. They're saying, Jeff, I want to keep the guys, you know, busy, not get in trouble. What can I do? Yeah. So I have them come out here and clean or do the other stuff, and then they learn. And so it's important that the community outside and the community inside are getting together to do something in common. And I want the kids, whenever they go, when their families move and stuff, I want them to bring that little bit of history with them, that love that I think Kay Howe shares. And they'll never forget that. And that's how we bring peace in this world. You know? But that's the first thing. And then the second one is, I wish I had a better answer. I'm not on natural resources, but I know that the mangrove works in other areas in the world, but in Hawaii, because it's so, it clogs up the streams, so you're going to get flooding more. And so if you're getting a sea level rise and flooding, that's a bad disaster happening. So we're trying to clean that out and plant vegetation that's going to be sustainable, that's going to reduce sedimentation and erosion. So I don't think I have a good answer for you. I could probably get that for you from my natural resources folks. Yes, sir.
It sounds very interesting, your job. I'm not sure whether you have a similar position with any other overseas base, like some Djibouti. You also have the same stuff like you to improve the local knowledge with